Nintendo isn't exactly known for competitive pricing. Try to find a less controversial statement than that, I dare you. $80 Mario Kart, $40 for each Mario Galaxy 20 years later, the criticism writes itself. Still, they've had some pretty good deals. Super Mario All-Stars was a collection of 4 absolute classics with enhanced 16-bit visuals for the Super Nintendo. As if that wasn't enough, they released a second version with Super Mario World later in that generation, and that cartridge is a steal. Kirby has a great collection on the Wii, with original challenge levels running in the Return to Dreamland engine. And while it might be weird to call these collections, the mini consoles had some pretty good games on them if that's your jam. And heck, if you mod them, you can add any game you want, and it's a pretty decent way to play them. Yeah, Nintendo might know their worth a little too well when it comes to pricing games these days, but every now and then they do throw us a bone with a decent deal. And then there was the best deal Nintendo ever offered.
There is supersonic hedgehog combat in the Nintendo GameCubes.
Nintendo's GameCube system.
On November 17th, 2003, Nintendo offered a new console bundle. It contained the Nintendo GameCube console, a controller, and the Legend of Zelda Collector's Edition, a special collection containing the Legend of Zelda, The Adventure of Link, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and a 20-minute playable demo of the newest game in the series, The Wind Waker. This bundle was $99. This offer is the ultimate treat for fans of the Legend of Zelda series, said George Harrison, Nintendo of America's senior vice president. Special treat is right. The GameCube was already retailing at $99 for months at that point. For new adopters, this collection was free. Folks who already owned a GameCube could also get the disc at no additional charge with a new subscription to Nintendo Power, or by registering with Nintendo's website and showing proof of ownership for 2 select GameCube games. The disc was never directly available for purchase. They were just giving this thing away. It might seem quaint 23 years later, but Majora's Mask was only 3 years old when this collection released. This would be like a console bundle in 2026 offering Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, Skyward Sword, and Twilight Princess. It's nuts! In the lead up to this bundle, IGN released an article titled, "This is the one you've been waiting for," and I agree. It's not just the games either. The presentation is top-notch. The menu has stylized screens, flavor text for every title, release dates and consoles, and there are even 2 full videos to watch. I love this retrospective. The Hyrule Field arrangement sounds great, and it's such a good celebration of every game up to Wind Waker. I remember when this truly was a comprehensive look at the series. There was something magical about it. I'd love to remake this in 4K with every game since. Just get a load of these descriptions. This is where the legend began, the game that started the Zelda series. It boasted an innovative and unique gameplay system, remarkably deep puzzle solving, and an epic score. Even now, over 15 years after it first launched, that appeal is still going strong. Wow! A 15-year legacy! Can you even believe it? I've watched video essays about Zelda 1's legacy that are older than 15. Thank God that's never gonna happen to my stuff. The Zelda series saw a dramatic change when its side-scrolling second installment appeared. While it adhered to the majestic story and puzzle-solving elements of the original, this new Zelda featured improved action and was appropriately dubbed The Adventure of Link. Agree to disagree on that one. I somehow doubt that was even the consensus in 2003. Taking full advantage of gaming in 3 dimensions, an innovative new Zelda exploded onto the scene in 1998, featuring gorgeous cinematics, hordes of hostile enemies, a revolutionary targeting system, and the freedom of traveling on horseback. Ocarina of Time left all who played it amazed and impressed. It's fascinating to see Ocarina of Time's impact just 5 years after release. The term instant classic gets thrown around a lot, but this blurb could be written today and nobody would bat an eye. I find contemporary reviews fascinating for games this legendary. While it was a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask was clearly a Zelda of a different color. As Link wandered into a 3-day journey in a mysterious parallel world, set in a town that would be crushed by the moon in 3 days, the story unfolded around masks that transformed their wearers. I mean, yeah, that's a pretty good review of Majora's Mask. I don't know, this menu just has so much sauce, you know? Look at all the effects, the sparkles, the confidence. Just compare it to the Switch interface today. This is fine, but it doesn't really make a statement. A statement like, support Simply Snaps on Patreon today for exclusive content and early access. For $5 a month, it's almost as good a deal as the Collector's Edition. See, statements are easy. Presentation is important, but it doesn't mean anything if the games are lacking. Let's check to see if we got our $0 worth. Zelda 1 and 2 seem to be running on the Dobutsu no Mori emulator, better known as Animal Crossing in the West. You can learn a lot more about this on Hunter R's channel, links in the description, but Animal Crossing had items you could obtain that booted classic NES games in your house. The emulator they developed for that was repurposed a ton in the early 2000s. One more fun fact about Animal Crossing is that it's a port of an N64 game only released in Japan. This isn't emulation, it's a full port to the GameCube. Since the game is so small, the entirety of Animal Crossing can easily fit into the GameCube's 24 megabytes of RAM. Because of this, you can completely remove your disc and play for hours without running into any issues. Changing areas, speaking to villagers, it all just works. That's because the game never needs to reach for new data from the disc because it always has the entire game in its memory. The only stuff not stored in the RAM at all times is the NES emulator, which will ask for the disc if removed. What's all that have to do with Zelda? I mean, Dobutsu no Mori runs on a modified Ocarina of Time engine. We're all children under Miyamoto-san. On to the games themselves. Zelda 1's prologue was really poorly translated on the original NES. Many years ago, Prince Darkness Ganon stole one of the Triforce with power. Princess Zelda had one of the Triforce with wisdom. She divided it into 8 units to hide it from Ganon before she was captured. Go find the 8 units, Link, to save her. Classic, undeniably. But Collector's Edition cleaned it up for the re-release. Stop me if you've heard this one, but the Famicom Disk System had a built-in microphone, and these Pulse voice enemies were meant to be defeated by shouting into it. Ah! Despite the English player guide still saying they're vulnerable to sound, this mechanic is completely absent in the NES release since there's no microphone on the console. Seeing as the GameCube also lacks a microphone, the Japanese release of Collector's Edition actually maps the microphone to the C-stick, meaning you can still kill the Pulse voice by knocking around the stick a little. Or not. Hang on, I definitely read that somewhere. Yeah, here it is on Zelda Dungeon's wiki. It says Collector's Edition maps the microphone to the right analog stick. GameCube Collector's Edition and Wii Virtual Console. I think I see what happened here. Let me boot up the game on Virtual Console, run back to Dungeon 5, and there it is. Guess it's not a Collector's Edition fun fact, more Virtual Console, but you learned it anyway. God, first the Toad Polygrotto, now this? How am I supposed to trust Zelda Dungeon when it comes to the features that really matter? The Famicom version of Zelda 2 had a seizure-inducing game over screen. That's not hyperbole, by the way. This is a genuinely dangerous graphic. I'm about to showcase it for educational purposes, but please look away if necessary. I'll let you know when it's safe. Here we are, take the final hit, and Jesus! Every time, it's somehow worse than I remember. The NES version thankfully changed this to a solid red image, and it even added a stinger with Ganon's silhouette at the end instead of just saying he returned. The Japanese version on Collector's Edition switches to a red screen as well, but it still flashes in a pretty gnarly way. No Ganon silhouette either. It's safe to look again, by the way. Zelda 2 saw no additional changes on Collector's Edition except for the copyright year. It didn't even get a second translation pass. I mean, what can I say? It's already a perfect game. They were right to leave it as is. Ocarina of Time has some pretty famous version differences. The Fire Temple originally used samples of an Islamic prayer that was replaced in version 1.2. Collector's Edition adopts all of 1.2's changes, but also replaces the Gerudo symbol to be the same as the pirates from Majora's Mask. This is actually patched at runtime by the emulator, and the symbol is unchanged on the ROM itself. Other obvious changes include the A and B buttons using their GameCube colors on the HUD, mentioning the C stick instead of the C buttons, and the save screen takes way longer for some reason. I always thought this save screen looked borderline unfinished. The sound cuts off multiple times, and it continually freezes too. Since we're on a more powerful console, the resolution has been doubled to 480p with progressive scan, and that makes a big difference. If you don't remember Ocarina of Time being particularly laggy, you haven't played on a real N64 in a while. This game targeted 20 FPS and couldn't hold that for 5 seconds without a lag spike. I wouldn't tolerate this from anything but Ocarina of Time, but being the GOAT gets you some special privileges. Collector's Edition fully supports the Rumble Pack, which lets you utilize the Stone of Agony as intended. The Wii Virtual Console disabled Rumble for some baffling reason, making the Stone of Agony completely useless on Wii. There are also a few changes that are likely unintentional, but have huge implications in speedrunning. On original N64, using a bomb chew out of bounds crashes the game due to the chew looking for non-existent ground coordinates. The Collector's Edition emulator doesn't crash when this happens. In fact, it causes 2 explosions at once, making hovering much easier. Pulling out a Deku Stick as adult crashes on N64, but GameCube pulls out a fully functional, invisible Deku Stick. The 100% speedrun uses this to keep Furore's Wind on B while using Deku Stick as a replacement sword for large portions of the run. This emulation quirk carried over to Virtual Console, which most runs are performed on. Wii U Virtual Console also allows Deku Stick as adult, but there are weird side effects. Switch Online is about the same. Majora's Mask has quite a few changes on Collector's Edition. It too got its second translation pass, just like Zelda 1. So instead of the Gorman Bothers, you can race the hard-working Gorman Brothers as God intended. The English release's Owl save system was also included in the Japanese release of Collector's Edition, removing the 3rd save slot in favor of temporary saves mid-cycle. Collector's Edition is really cool because it's kind of a gray area between emulation and re-release. Things like Japanese Owl saving wouldn't be included again in any future release of the N64 version, which is really strange to me. What really blows my mind though is the quality of this emulation. Context is important here. The NES is one thing, but anyone who's messed around with emulation knows the N64 is notoriously difficult to get right. Yet here we are somehow in 2003, emulating the Nintendo 64 with near-perfect performance on a console with 24 megabytes of memory. Compare this to the Ocarina of Time emulation they debuted 18 years later on Nintendo Switch, and it's all the more impressive. Clearly this isn't an issue of brute force. The GameCube is far underpowered compared to the Switch. This emulation is a feat of optimization, creative solutions, and a strong understanding of the N64's architecture. It turns out this emulator is even older than the collection. It was first used for Ocarina of Time Master Quest back in November of 2002. There's not a lot we know about the reason for creating this emulator. It was done at some point in late 2001 and seemed to be for R&D purposes. When they struck gold and made one of the most impressive N64 emulators of all time, they released it in limited runs for testing purposes before eventually using it as the foundation for Wii Virtual Console in 2007. Huge shoutouts to Tharo, by the way, who decompiled the Collector's Edition emulator a few years back and answered a lot of questions I had while writing this video. It helped me appreciate all the more how impressive this little 2002 emulator really is. I found some contemporary web forums where gamers tried dropping other ROMs into the Master Quest emulator with mixed results. And I might be 22 years late to the party, but I can't let these schmucks have all the fun. Using a tool called GZ Inject with a lot of help by my friend Encounter, I managed to inject Super Mario 64 into the Collector's Edition emulator over Majora's Mask's menu slot. The emulator actually has boot configurations for 24 N64 games, despite only ever being officially used for 2 of them. It's fascinating they would put this much work into an emulator that would see such such sparse use. I wonder what they had planned for this thing, you know? It's not much today, but seeing Mario 64 in 480p would have been pretty incredible in 2004, but it's not perfect. The fog is pretty gnarly in Bob-omb Battlefield, and the HUD doesn't load, even though there's a specific function in the emulator's code to fix that. Despite being capable of playing 24 games, this really is an Ocarina of Time emulator at the end of the day. And that's because it's just easier to get close enough with emulation and patch whatever else is wrong on a per-game basis. A 100% accurate emulator that runs a console's entire library is never really the goal for a company, and the Master Quest emulator was far from perfect. Even Majora's Mask has a couple issues, and that's officially supported on the disc. It's pretty impressive this works at all, considering Majora's Mask uses the 4MB expansion pack, and the GameCube has to fully emulate that to run the game. Keep in mind, 4MB is 17% of the GameCube's RAM, and all that's being tied up pretending to be an expansion pack. It runs well, but it has several issues they just couldn't iron out. This led them to include a disclaimer on the game's boot screen. It basically just says, don't worry, your console isn't malfunctioning, the game is. Even with these minor audio bugs and the occasional crash, Majora's Mask on Collector's Edition is a perfectly playable experience. In fact, it's so playable that while grabbing footage for this short segment, I accidentally played the entire game. 3.5 hour run? I still got it. It's genuinely hard to believe this collection even exists. Nintendo has never been this generous with Zelda before or since. 4 of their proudest titles effectively bundled with the console for free, and the emulation is still some of the best they've done to this day. I had the Ocarina of Time Master Quest disc before this, but without Collector's Edition, I never would have played Majora's Mask during my formative years. I'm sure I'd have found it eventually on Virtual Console or something, but this collection is why I and so many others grew up with this game. And since Majora's Mask is one of my favorite games of all time, I'm just really grateful for the experience. On the topic of having access to a game in your formative years, I do have to mention the strange omission of A Link to the Past. It was the only console Zelda missing from this collection. I remember watching the retrospective on repeat as a kid and wondering what this game even was. There's a magic meter? The graphics are so much better than Zelda 1. I wanted to play it. Unfortunately for me, they'd already released A Link to the Past a year prior on Game Boy Advance. That wasn't emulation either, it was a proper port accompanying the first Four Swords game. Is this really the reason we were denied a definitive Collector's Edition? The retrospective's flavor text does say, with the Collector's Edition and Game Boy player, it is now possible to play the complete Zelda Legend on one system, the Nintendo GameCube. I guess that is true. The Game Boy player does open the door to Link's Awakening, the Oracle games, and technically A Link to the Past, but I have to assume this screen-crunched, color-washed Game Boy Advance port is not as good as an emulation of the Super Nintendo version would have been. I suppose another explanation could be the seeming lack of an official Super Nintendo emulator until Wii Virtual Console. I'm sure you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but I can't remember a single example of Super Nintendo emulation on Nintendo hardware before or near the release of Collector's Edition. I guess pairing that with the GBA port a year prior meant it just wasn't worth the effort of putting A Link to the Past on this disc. It's not the end of the world or anything, beggars can't be choosers, but I didn't get to grow up with A Link to the Past because of this, and I'm still mad about it. It's pretty cool the GameCube was capable of playing every Zelda game to date though. I remember when the Wii U was the ultimate Zelda machine, even after the Switch release. With its Virtual Console, you could play everything through Breath of the Wild on one console, including HD re-releases of Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. These days, the Switch 2 can play almost every Zelda game, but we're still missing a few big ones, like Twilight Princess. Seriously, Nintendo, you teased Sunshine over a year ago. Enough of the slow drip nonsense, just upload the damn ROMs. And even if the Switch 2 eventually becomes the definitive Zelda machine, it won't have the same character as this collection. The menu, the 2000s charm, it's just far more effort than they would care to exert these days. Alright, enough negativity. Even if I'm a bit disappointed by Nintendo's current behavior, I could keep myself busy for the rest of my life with their classic library. No matter what they do, it's not like the Ocarina of Time remake they're cooking up is gonna overwrite my copy on cartridge or disc. I say let them cook. Maybe it'll be great. Either way, I've got almost everything I need right here on this disc. It's almost heaven. Zelda 1, Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, some cool videos, and a 20-minute demo of The Wind Waker? The newest addition to the Zelda series? Hang on, what's all this then? How much of the game is on the collection? Can you beat the game using glitches? Is there a way to disable the 20-minute timer? I have so many questions. Well, see you in part 2.